Practice problem number 3 for chapter 20. Specifically, this is for exercise 2018. So it says prepare journal entries to record the following production activities. For number 1, purchase $80,000 of raw materials on credit. Number 2, used $42,000 of direct materials in the roasting department. And number 3, used $22,500 of indirect materials in the production. So let's start with number 1. So I'm going to prepare the general journal here. So transaction, general journal. DR for debit, CR for credit. Okay. So number 1, transaction 1 says purchased $80,000 of raw materials on credit. So raw materials was purchased. So we know that raw materials was acquired. So we're going to debit raw materials inventory. Okay, because it's going to go into the inventory account. I think my computer's kind of messing up here. There we go. Inventory account. We're going to debit that account by 80,000. Okay, so raw materials are included in the inventory account, and it is an asset, so we're going to debit it to increase the balance in that account. And these raw materials was purchased on credit, which means that the account that's going to be credited is going to be accounts payable. For $80,000. Okay, transaction 2. It says used $42,000 of direct materials in the roasting department. Okay, so out of this $80,000 of raw materials that was purchased, $42,000 of it was used up in the department called roasting. So since raw materials inventory of 42,000 was used, we're going to now credit raw materials inventory for 42,000. Okay, so we used it up, so we took it out of the inventory account of raw materials, and which is why we're crediting it to reduce the balance in that account. And we're moving that balance of 42,000 into an account called work in process inventory dash roasting, because it's going to the roasting department. All right. And that's going to be a debit of $42,000. So this is what's happening. Raw materials inventory was removed, or the $42,000 worth of raw materials is moved from that inventory into the roasting department's inventory, which is in that work in process inventory account. All right. So one inventory balance goes down and another one goes up. So that's just letting you know that some inventory or some raw materials was transferred into another department. Lastly, transaction 3. It says used $22,500 of indirect materials in production. Okay. So it lets us know indirect materials was used. All right. So direct materials and indirect materials come from raw materials, just so we know. So it is coming from the raw materials inventory account, direct and indirect materials. All right. So this means that raw materials is going to be credited again for $22,500. Okay. Now, since this is related to indirect materials in production, indirect costs such as indirect materials and indirect labor, those are going to get recorded in factory overhead. Okay, because it's indirectly involved in the production process. So factory overhead is going to be credited for $22,500. All right, so this is what's happening. Raw materials was used, transferred into the factory overhead account. So I'm going to zoom out so we can see the big picture here, all three transactions.